Hi, my name is Jackson Crawford. I'm a specialist in the Old Norse language and related subjects like Norse mythology, runes, sagas, that sort of thing. And after a long number of years teaching at various universities, in the past year and a half, I've embarked on taking a shot at making a career out of just public education, out of videos on my YouTube channel, royalties on my books, consulting projects for media, like video games. I consulted on Assassin's Creed Valhalla, or movies. I consulted on Disney's Frozen, or sort of seemingly hybrid projects like The Great Courses. And in the years of having experience doing some of that stuff, I've realized that there's not a lot of good information out there for either academics who are considering doing this kind of media consulting, or perhaps for media companies that might be considering bringing an academic consultant on board. While I'm hardly the representative that either the academic or the media side of this would choose for their side, I have seen both sides and can speak a little bit to what the confluence of those interests is like, and some things for each side to keep in mind about the other. Now, I come at this from the academic side, so perhaps some of what I'll say will be interpreted as digs at the media side of this equation. However, I don't mean them that way, because I don't expect, everyone working in a media company to know everything about a given academic subject. That's the academic's job. The problem comes in how the two sides understand each other's job, though, as typically the academic thinks that the media side is easier than it is, and the media side tends to think the academic stuff is easier than it is. The worst problem that I get into with this is that my subject, or the aspect of my subject that I'm most often talking about with the public, Norse mythology, is so popular that many people think that they have a better command of it than they do. Right? They've seen some Avengers movies, they've looked it up on Wikipedia, whatever. How difficult can this stuff be? It's stories about some gods. In fact, it's much more complicated than that. The source material is much more difficult than that. And a lot of the kind of common knowledge about it is untrue. For example, runes are an alphabet, not mystic symbols for mystic concepts. The gods are much more personalities than roles, right? God of Thunder is a meaningless description of Thor, but you can give a really interesting long description of his personality. And so what I wind up with is, so often people with that superficial understanding assume that I basically have just a glorified version of that superficial understanding, and either, quote, correct me based on that superficial understanding, or mishear me in the first place as saying something that lines up with their superficial understanding. This can get pretty bad. I have been at various times, and these are real honest-to-God examples, not all of which made it to a final product, but at various times I've been quoted as saying things like the gods kill their enemies at Ragnarok and live. Slightly untrue. The real fanboys of Norse myth might quibble with that one. I've been quoted as saying things like Oslo, Sweden. I have been quoted in a misinterpretation of my remark about Norse dragons not having legs as presenting evidence that anacondas lived in Scandinavia during the Middle Ages. Not a position that I actually hold. Many things like that. In fact, it is pretty hard for any media project, that is a project where someone else is intermediating between me and the public and presenting information about this, for some distortion like that not to creep in somewhere, right? I say something about Thor and Loki, and someone just absentmindedly adds the brothers Thor and Loki because they are in the Marvel universe, but they're actually not in our original medieval sources, and then all of a sudden I have the fanboys crawling down my neck, right, because they think I don't know they're not brothers. So this is actually a really difficult thing to keep in mind on the academic side, is it's not so much that I think, and I'm going to present this in the best faith, the best light that I can, it's not so much that people are not respecting your expertise on a subject, so much as they don't even understand necessarily what the expertise in your subject is. And you have to be pretty vigilant about these things, and you also have to be just about ready for something to slip through the cracks, right? Especially in a really, really big project where there may be thousands of people working on something, you're not going to consult with everyone, right? So someone is not going to talk to you about some aspect of something, and it's going to potentially be wrong. And then, there are going to be people blaming you for it if you're publicly taking credit for having consulted on such a project. You have to be kind of ready for that. On the media side, I would say, please try to respect how frustrating it can be for academics to see what you consider maybe very minor errors or minor inconsistencies presented as coming from their mouths, right? We are much happier, if I may speak for academics for a moment, to be quoted directly and not have our remarks embellished or seemingly corrected. If there's something that looks wrong to you, ask, please. Just those mutual understandings would make a lot of this a lot easier. And that is the main thought that I have as far as the content of this sort of consulting work goes. Let me give you a quick word from my sponsor. I'll come back and talk a little bit about some of the payment issues that I think come up between these two groups. It's often not tenured professors who are doing the kind of media consulting that I'm talking about. Sometimes it is, but very often it's the people who are not quite as established, who don't have the same stability of income, who start doing things like taking some movie consulting jobs or something like that. Those people, not to put too fine a point of it, are not used to being paid very much, right? You take a grad student or an untenured university instructor, and you can blow our hair back sometimes by saying we'll give you a sandwich to write 300 words in runes for us. There are people who are tempted to do that. The problem is, and I guess there's not enough people doing this for there to be like a union of media concerned academics to lay down some ground rules for this. But when we take too little for our work, I think we tend to encourage media companies to think of academic specialist knowledge as cheap, and we really oughtn't to. Yes, it's a good idea to share information. It's also a good idea to say, hey, even if answering this question in particular took me 5 minutes, it took me 20 freaking years of study, a lot of which I'm still in debt for, right? I deserve to be paid fairly. So don't ever settle, I would say, for less than an hourly rate that's equivalent to what you're paid in the highest paying job that you have, because if you're something like an adjunct, you probably have 3 different teaching jobs. And where possible, try to get a cut. Obviously, it's not going to happen with consulting on movies or video games, but I would never accept I'm almost like putting my hat over my heart here as I say this. I would never do a book for a flat rate or do some kind of adult education thing that's going to be available for download for maybe years or decades to come for a flat rate. I mean, that's just robbing yourself, right? You are better off not doing those projects at all because you're going to lose more money from other opportunities that you could have taken during that time. So academics, don't value yourself too little. And media companies, I would ask that you try to be understanding about just how excited academics can sometimes get about the opportunity to share their knowledge and especially about a subject they're so passionate about usually. and not to take advantage of that if possible, right? No one is expecting to get rich off of this, but I've been offered some embarrassingly low rates for information that, again, is a result of 20 years of study that, you know, few people could ever do right. And it is, it can be it can depress an academic, right, to be offered very little for that kind of thing, because we so often confront the feeling that what we did is not really worth that much to society, if not to ourselves, and often to ourselves as well. So, you know, again, I'm not trying to roast either side. Obviously, I'm going to have more sympathy on the academic side, although I've worked enough with the media side of things that I think that most people working in these companies, there are obviously exceptions, but most are competent professionals who care about the academics who work with them as other competent professionals. We just often don't understand one another very well, as we do have such different professions. But in a way, maybe the professions really aren't so different, right? We're all about trying to get some kind of information, be that for, you know, a movie or a lecture or whatever, out there to the public in a way that they want to pay attention to. Those are some thoughts about the interface between academic life and media life from someone who's been at that interface for a while and had some successes and some failures in that interface. For now, from right at Treeline in beautiful Colorado, let me wish you all the best.